From the studios of Inspire FM, the time is now 7 o'clock.
From the heart of Bedfordshire in Luton on 105.1 FM. This is Inspire FM News.
This is the national and international news today, Tuesday, 6th of May for Inspire FM, read by Shaheen Mirza. Hamas says no point to truce talks as Israel plans to capture all of Gaza. Israel attacks Yemen, Lebanon, Syria, and Gaza in one day. Pakistan tests missiles. India orders drills amid Kashmir standoff. Russia carries out deadly attacks in Sumy and Odessa as Ukraine launches drones in Moscow. Germany's Merz fails to be elected chancellor in shock first round vote. And that concludes today's news roundup.
Always up to date with everything that's happening locally, nationally, and internationally. This is Inspire FM.
Assalamu alaikum, and it's a warm welcome back from Inspire FM to myself. I'm Ali Khan, your host for the Parenting Show. For those listeners who have been dedicated listeners to the Parenting Show will remember I initially started the show and then took a very, very long break. Of course, life and challenges and change of lifestyles, jobs took me away, but I am back. I am back with my listeners running the Parenting Show on Inspire FM. Firstly and foremostly, I'd like to thank Inspire for having me back, calling me back. Whether I'm back with popular demand, that's to be seen. Waiting to hear from you guys, waiting to have some discourse over the various topics that we are going to discuss every Tuesday night, 7 p.m. I think foremost and more fundamentally, the sister who is standing in for me and did a fantastic job. She lost her father-in-law. Her husband was a very dear brother, a very close friend of mine. So I would just like to pay my condolences and du'as. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raise her father-in-law and my friend's father in the highest rank of Jannah. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give the family sabr. And again, Jazakallah khair for taking the reins and running this show whilst I was busy with other things. But it's nice to be back. It's nice to see the team again, and it's nice to be on this side of the microphone. Just a quick reminder, the number to call in is on 01582 481822. And if you want to WhatsApp, it's 07779 481 822. Just a quick overview. I intend to discuss many different issues over the weeks to come. There's been a lot of time away, which means there's been a lot of thinking, a lot of preparing, a lot of networking. So hopefully, inshallah, the plan is that the listeners will not be listening to my boring voice for one whole hour. We will have guests, and today we do have a guest who will be calling in around 7:30 because he just finishes lessons at 7:30. So he will call in, inshallah, at 7:30. But there will be various topics we're going to be discussing. We'll be discussing everything centered around parenting, whether that is some of the horrific things that we see around us, like knife crime and gun crime. And Luton has had a casualty over the gun crime. How do we deal with some of these issues? We deal with some normal day-to-day parenting. How do you deal with difficult children? How do you deal with adolescent problems? And then we're going to be dealing, of course, there are also the international dynamics that are going on in the world. How do we break these things to our children? Of course, some of the scenes that we see on television and on social media are horrific. But of course, there has to be some level of filter when we are discussing these various events around the world, some level of filter when talking to our children. And it'd be interesting show to hear different people's views on this. I'm hoping also to talk about Islamic schools and where we are. Some of my future guests will include those who have been running or those who have run Islamic schools and the challenges and the pitfalls. Just recently, we see Islamic schools have been slammed with the VAT, which has, of course, a knock-on effect to the children because the fees go up. The parents who were borderline just affording it cannot afford it. So these are some of the issues that I hope you guys will tune in every Tuesday, 7 o'clock on the Parenting Show on Inspire FM. So today's topic is very important. Want to talk about, and I'm not sure if you saw the flyer that went out on WhatsApp, Netflix series Adolescence. Where do we start? Where do we start unpacking this whole discussion about Adolescence, the Netflix drama? It was so popular, it got a mention in Parliament. And everyone in at least in the education domain, or those involved in children, or those involved in raising children, they were talking about this. Now, let me, for the listeners who are in the dark about this Netflix drama series, Adolescence, let me give you a quick insight into this drama series. Basically, it's about a 13-year-old boy who murdered his classmates, and it's heavy focus on the toxic masculinity that the boy was affected by. There were other points to that were highlighted, like family structures and other matters, but the heavy focus which drew the news's attention, and which drew Parliament's attention, and which drew the attention of Keir Starmer, because he said all schools should be showing this Netflix series. Actually, if I remember correctly, even Gareth Southgate commented on the role models young boys have in society, and these role models are quite toxic. And of course, whenever you talk about masculinity and toxic masculinity, Andrew Tate always gets a mention. So he was mentioned by I believe by Gareth Southgate, or at least Starmer. But it was, and then you had some of the broadsheets covering this topic and giving reviews on this Netflix series, and weighing in on the debate on should we or should this or shouldn't it not be, should it or should it not be shown in the schools. So that's the topic today, this masculinity that we are facing. I take a deep sigh. 2025, society is still debating, or still, should I say, this issue hasn't been resolved. And of course, we have a very unique perspective on this whole topic. From an Islamic perspective, we have a very unique topic, a unique perspective on women and how we look at women. But I just want to maybe, before we get the call from a teacher who's going to join us today and talk about the ins and outs, I just want to maybe put this whole thing about masculinity in perspective. A lot of people actually, attribute this to Andrew Tate and the likes of Andrew Tate, and say this is where it started. But it wasn't. It's not where it started. It was many moons ago, even before he was born, actually. And effectively, it's focusing on misogyny. And if I was to really break this down, because I do not want to use words that some of our listeners may not have come across, but misogyny is a contempt, and I really do not like using this word. I don't like using it in online, especially. It's a hatred, contempt for the female, for women. And this idea was born many moons ago, well before the likes of Andrew Tate were born. So this is not a new phenomenon. This is not something we're grappling with new. Unfortunately, we see it in all stratas of society. It takes place in office spaces. It takes place in sport. It takes place in hospitals and institutions like schools. And hence the Adolescence Netflix series made a big impact upon people. And these are some of the questions we're going to put to our teacher, who is going to be calling in at 7:30. If you have a view, if you have something to say about this Netflix series, or generally you have something to say about how do you deal with this topic with your children, or have you seen traits of this within the community? Have you taken some active steps in educating people about this? I'd love to hear from you. The number to call is 01582 481 822. And if you are shy from calling, pop in a WhatsApp to me on 07779 481 822. Let's start unpacking some of this vis-a-vis parenting and children. It's very, very important, I think, to give the right view, or to at least nurture our children with the right perspective. I think from the time I was initially on the parenting show to now, things have changed. Generally, things have evolved so much in society. I'm not talking about just the upgrade of this beautiful technology I see in front of me in the studios and the up-to-date technology, but I'm talking about society has really changed. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that I took a break, but coming back and I look outside the window, metaphorically speaking, and I see so much change when it comes to children, when it comes to raising children, when it comes to challenges. And one of those is to actually, how do we in the household, in a Muslim household, and even if you are a non-Muslim listening, how do we deal with this issue of misogyny? How do we actually prevent this creeping into our houses? And then on top of that, can we really escape it? I would love to hear from some of our listeners. Can we escape misogyny? I can rattle off quite easily some examples where female politicians have suffered misogynistic remarks from male politicians in parliament. Is this, can we really escape it, or is it a matter of damage limitation and doing what we can? What kind of culture breeds this actually? What kind of ideas, what kind of culture breeds this view that you have a contentment for women? And it's quite dangerous. The Netflix series was actually, it was very, very, I mean, there was a lot of talk about the young child who played the main role, and he had never acted, and he really actually his acting really brought about some home truths about the way he spoke about women and how they deserve certain behavior and how they they are deserving of some ill treatment. And again, I quote, this was from the series. These are not my views, and definitely not the views of Inspire FM, but these are just quotes I got from the series when the psychologist walked into the center where he was detained, and she started asking him about how he felt towards women and how his father treated his mother. And you could see that this young actor played very well the role of a very disturbed child. And it was almost that his breeding ground, or can we say being groomed, was social media, was YouTube, these kind of places. And then, of course, the whole thing about, again, a very awkward subject, this whole thing about very young, from a very young age, that we see the culture of sexting, where pictures of nude pictures are sent round on messages. This is all intertwined with this view with this culture of misogyny. So how do we deal with it? How do we actually start dealing with it? What are the signs we're looking for? I mean, maybe just to give you some examples or an insight. You've got a brother and a sister, and the brother's always talking harshly to his sister. So always, being rude, always degrading her, always thinking that, she's the lesser being. She should deserve the lesser opportunities. She should deserve the lesser privileges at home. how do you read? I'd love to hear that from the listeners. How are we reading into this? Or do we feel that this is sibling rivalry and we sign it off? And at what point do you actually start getting concerned about this? Of course, um, the Islamic view is very, very clear that any lady, any woman, any sister in a household, of course, she will be treated uh, like a princess. And we mean nothing less. And what we don't mean is that she doesn't uh, abscond from her role and responsibility, not at all. But the honor, the dignity, the respect, the way you call, the way you interact, the way you speak, it's all related to actually the Islamic perspective of honor and dignity. Um, so this is really important. I must add that on top of all of this issue of the adolescence, it wasn't long ago where the Supreme Court in this country ruled what a woman actually is defined. So again, deep sigh. We are now in 2025, and we are, hearing stories like, "What is the definition of a woman?" So it's uh, maybe society has evolved technologically, economically, but socially, it looks like that we are, what we're seeing out there is really, really worrying. Um, when these kind of things have to be defined by supreme courts, when legislation has to be brought out against talking ill or sexual harassment laws or gender harassment laws are brought out, it really is a worrying trade. So coming back to parenting and our children, how do we deal with this? How are we going to actually start nurturing the correct view of women? And I'm sure our listeners are going to have some interesting stories about the way they have interacted, or maybe they've heard something, or maybe you've discovered that your child has come home and spoke to you about this crazy idea of sending nude, or even maybe they've received a nude message, uh, text message, or WhatsApp message, because this unfortunately has become the popular culture. And when this becomes the popular culture, it becomes the majority view, unfortunately. Um, if you are grappling with this, by all means, feel free to give me a message. And even if you need further outreach and help on dealing with some of these issues, I'm more than happy to reach out after the show or in between shows to discuss and help and navigate some of these challenges you have. However, um, back to the four walls and the roof called the house. How do we actually now start looking at these views, and how do we deal with these views? Uh, and it's interesting. It's interesting. I don't want to limit this whole discussion to whether this should be shown in a school or not. We will save that for our guest, who will call in, inshallah, at 7:30. But more importantly, how do we deal with this matter of misogyny? There is no actually, the minute you recognize that there is a weakness in somebody, it's not, weakness does not, and I'm talking about any type of weakness. I mean, I have a lot of weaknesses, and I don't mean weaknesses in terms of my actions, but I'm not a strong guy. I'm very thin. For those of you who know me, I'm very slim. Um, my eyesight is not great. Sometimes my head is in space and I lack focus sometimes. So these are my weaknesses. Now, to think that in the modern world, someone would come along and exploit my weaknesses, exploit the fact that I can't see very clearly, or exploit the fact that I'm not really focused, so tries to, pull the wool over my eyes, exploits the fact that I'm really skinny and slim and can push his or her weight around with me. Where does this start from? Where does this idea of exploitation start from? Because when you start seeing weaknesses or differences in people, that's when, if you don't have an anchor, in life, if you don't have some real solid anchors in the perspective of life that you carry, you will start exploiting. And this is what we've seen. Unfortunately, women bear the brunt. And it's not just women, it's people of different color, people of different faith. But today's show is focusing on this issue of adolescence and misogyny. Um, is when you see a weakness in any human being and you begin to start to exploit it, and you begin to demean and dehumanize that person. I mean, where in Allah's name in 2025, how have we reached this juncture? How have we reached this juncture? And if you have a view on answering the most fundamental question, how have we reached this juncture when the whole world is, when we have rockets going to space, and when we have technology, and we're talking about electric cars, and we're we see a tech war going on between the big nations out there. How have we still not overcome some very fundamental ideas or principles about weakness does not equal to exploitation? How come we still haven't solved this? How come the mankind and the human race up and down the world, and this is, by the way, I'm not although our reality around us is really focusing on where we are in a local phenomena or a national phenomena, this issue of misogyny expands throughout the globe. It's not just a national phenomena. It's not just a national problem. It's a east and west. And I tell you one thing for sure: the only thing that I think that can level out this whole discussion and put an end to it, of course, is the Islamic perspective. And we have to be very, very clear about that. Actually, I was reading the Guardian newspaper last week, and there was a lady who wrote a fantastic article that, and effectively, she was saying that she's been abused by men since the age of 15. 15. So here comes the parenting aspect. Since the age of 15, she was abused. She's not known anything other than men trying to take advantage. She's a very popular author, I believe. She's authored a book about this whole subject. And she wrote an article in the Guardian. She said, look, I'm done. I'm done with men. I'm done with men. And the issue is, the problem is that if we don't get this discussion right in our households, it will end up creating very skewed personalities who are walking around on this earth, one, creating more skewed perspectives, and two, most fundamentally, who are well away from the principles and ideals of the Islamic perspective of a woman. I mean, we can break the whole discussion of woman into mother, into wives, and there is all sorts of evidences and dalil that talk about, the rights of a mother, and the best of you are best to their wives. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has elevated the issue of or the status of a woman beyond, sometimes even beyond our comprehension, because not saying off to your parents, which include your mother, the Jannah being at the feet of your mother, the best of you are to best of their wife. So we have all these evidences on one side, and then I open the door and I read broadsheets, and I watch drama series on Netflix, and my children go out and they interact at school. Then they go in the community, and what do they see all around? What do they see all around? Quite the opposite. And it was actually, it was the Tate syndrome that actually lifted the carpet and exposed this, by him actually saying things which were conducive to misogyny. So no holding back there, that he was absolutely out of order the way he spoke about women. I'm not sure if some of you even watched the documentary about Andrew Tate. It was on last week. And what did we see there? We saw actually a whole, almost it was an industry making money. So these are some of the points that I want to, inshallah, discuss with our teacher when he calls in at 7:30, to really talk about what has he seen, what's his experiences, and I would love to hear from the listeners. 01582 481 822. And if you're shy from talking, give me a WhatsApp on 07779 481 822. We'll shortly be heading in for a break, and then thereafter, hopefully, we'll get our teacher guest online, calling in, and then we'll put some questions to him. But if you have a view, if you have any concerns, or if you would like to share the way out, how do we deal with this in our homes, give us a call, and please do be part of this discussion.
This program will continue after the break. Continue listening to Inspire FM. Inspire FM.
Inspire 105.1 FM.
Hot days? Take it slow and easy. Avoid intense exercise between 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. when the sun is at its peak. If you must be outside, take plenty of breaks in the shade and hydrate frequently. Listen to your body, rest when needed, and stay cool. The heat can be tough, but with the right approach, you'll keep your cool all summer long.
Enjoy quality and tasty 100% authentic halal Chinese and Thai food from Gao Express, brought to you by the team behind Top's Pizza in Luton. Choose from all your delicious Chinese and Thai favourites. Then order for delivery or collection from Gao Express in Wellington Street, Luton, Marketplace, Stevenage, and now also on Nightingale Road in Hitchin. Open daily midday till late. Find the number or order online at Gao, that's GAO, express.co.uk, or like Gao Express on Facebook.
वेस्टबोर्न फार्मेसी हफ्ते के 7 दिन सुबह 9 बजे से लेकर रात 9 बजे तक खुली रहती है। हमारी सर्विसेज में शामिल हैं ट्रैवल वैक्सीनेशंस, स्टॉप स्मोकिंग, डायबिटीज चेक, बच्चों की ग़िज़ा और बहुत कुछ। लुटन और डंस्टेबल में फ्री प्रिस्क्रिप्शन, पिकअप और डिलीवरी सर्विसेज भी की जाती है। इसके अलावा आप मेडिसिन के इस्तेमाल के लिए फ्री मशवरा भी ले सकते हैं। वेस्टबोर्न फार्मेसी 198 B Dunstable Road, Luton, corner of Westbourne Road. Telephone 01582 419 432.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته وبسم الله. قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أحب الأعمال إلى الله أدوامها وإن قل. That the most beloved action to Allah is those which are regular, even if little.
Career power is walking into an interview and knowing you've got the skills, the experience, the edge. How do you get it? Come to a University of Bedfordshire Open Day, where we'll show you our real-world teaching and industry-led courses in action, introduce you to our industry partners and our supportive community that's got your back from day one through to graduation and beyond. Want career-powered education? Book onto a University of Bedfordshire Open Day now at beds.ac.uk.
Are you looking for a prompt let and comprehensive property management by property professionals? If so, relax and let a safe registered agent take care of all your property matters. Marigold Residentials believe in 100% customer satisfaction and aim to provide quality service at very competitive prices. Why not also let us take care of your property sale? We're now a proud member of the National Association of Estate Agents. We also advertise in local papers free of charge. Visit us at 251 Dunstable Road or call us on 617-617. Terms and conditions apply.
Richard didn't want to die, but he couldn't stop himself. The collision didn't kill him, but he wasn't wearing a seatbelt, so he hit the inside of the car. That didn't kill him either, but his internal organs carried on travelling until they hit his rib cage, and his lungs were punctured, and the main artery from his heart was torn. And that's what killed Richard.
From the studios of Inspire FM, the time is now 7:30.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the Parenting Show on Inspire FM. Of course, we're discussing a very important topic today, the Netflix drama series Adolescence. And I've at the start of the show, I explained what that's all about and the mentions it's got, and how the Keir Starmer also said that it should be shown in every school. I do believe that we have a teacher who's imminently going to call any second now. A teacher by the name of Shabaz Latif. He will call, and we have some questions to put to him regarding schools and this whole culture of misogyny, and what's his views and what's his take on some of these things, and maybe even to share some insights he has about his experiences regarding this whole discussion. Nevertheless, we carry on until we hear from Shabaz. Hopefully he'll be calling us any second now. But carrying on from before the break, it's so vital that we discuss this issue, make it very clear amongst our children that what are the pitfalls, why it's wrong, how we're going to actually discuss it. And I think the starting point should always be to explain what is it that we are speaking about when it comes to explaining such things to our children. Just to say, don't be rude to women, don't be bad to your sister. I think we have to put in the wider context, and that wider context is that we don't want to grow up in a world where women, or in fact anyone, is seen as an inferior being. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala recognizes the difference. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala recognizes the difference between man and woman. And the difference is in the biological makeup. But nowhere has Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually, nowhere has Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sorry, that is Shabaz just trying to get through. Let me just quickly see if we can get him on. Okay, we will carry on. Hopefully he will be back with us very soon. So very quickly again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, very clearly there is a recognition of the differences in the biological makeup of man and woman. But nowhere has this been a sudden exploitation of the genders, of the sexes. Nowhere suddenly it says that you are better. And remember, there are several verses and evidences that talk about the issue is that the only difference is taqwa. And the issue when it comes to defining or recognizing the biological differences, that issue only is resorted to roles and responsibilities, but not greater or lesser. Not greater or lesser. So it's important that we actually understand this from the Islamic perspective, that what would happen today if the mothers and the sisters were taken out of the equation? Most households, if not all, would fall apart. What would happen if fathers were taken out of the equation? They'd fall apart. And this is the beauty about Islam. This is the beauty about raising the family, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has always given us a balanced system. He's always actually, the male complements the female, and the female complements the male. Never have these two the makeup of these two sexes being pitted against each other, and there is vile competition between the two genders in order to prove each other wrong or in order to prove themselves right. That's never been the case. And all of a sudden, we find ourselves society where there's vile competition, man to prove himself better than woman, woman. We see there's a whole movement of women trying to prove that they are equal to men and better than men and they can do things better than men. I mean, what's the need? Years, decades, time, energy, money, heartache, tears has been spent on this, trying to prove and compete, when in essence, the fitrah of insan, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put very clearly and has given it roles and responsibilities according to the fitrah, but has not lessened in the eyes of each other, have not lessened one another. So it's so important that we look at this from the correct perspective. And it's so easy to fall into any one of those traps. And it's almost that you swing from one thing to another and then back to that. But we have to remember the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is about wasat, and wasat is balance. Wasat is balance. And balance is so key when it comes to dealing with especially this issue. I believe we have Shabaz on the line. Shabaz, are we?
Yeah, hello. You okay?
Yeah, alhamdulillah. How are you, Shabaz?
Alhamdulillah, I'm very well. Thank you.
How was your day of teaching?
Yeah, it was good. Full of challenges as usual, but now very good, very productive.
Good. I hope you're not too tired to join us for the last half an hour, 20 minutes on this show.
No, absolutely not. No, it was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
No, very welcome, Shabaz. Shabaz, let's get into it very quickly. Of course, we are discussing the Netflix drama Adolescence and the implications on that. Rather than just keeping it abstract, Shabaz, how long have you been in education for?
So, I mean, I've never left education in terms of I went to school, I went to university, qualified, and then I've been sort of teaching ever since. I've been teaching 8 years now.
Oh, wow. Well done. And Shabaz, have you actually seen any conscious changes in this subject matter, in the way boys speak to girls and the culture that exists generally in society, that we are really grappling with this strong male-dominated misogynistic culture, and then on the counter we see the counter to misogyny, a very strong feminist rebuttal coming, and it's almost that these two sides are torn apart and never can they see eye to eye. Do you see this playing out on a less what's the word I'm looking, articulate manner in schools amongst children?
I mean, first of all, I think the first thing that we have to sort of have a look at is our definition of misogyny, because over the sort of, I'd say, the past 2 to 3 years, the definitions of misogyny vary from institution to institution. I mean, if we're talking about misogyny, in what regard are we talking about it before we get into the sort of to the answers of that?
Yeah, sure. Shall we? Okay, so let's simplify. Let's talk about sexism. Okay.
Sure.
How does this manifest? Because there is a whole language behind sexism. There's peer pressure. There's dress codes. There's of course, online harassment. All of these things. And I don't really want to get into the political theory of misogyny and go back to Aristotle and all of these things. But very simply, I want to talk about what is the attitude of boys growing up and what you've encountered in school, and what is the attitude of girls growing up? And I'm sure there is a very sound level of respect in some aspects, and I'm sure in some aspects you have seen some things that are concerning you.
Absolutely. So I think to answer that question, first of all, we look at sort of the structure of society, and often what I find is that you see varying attitudes in every class that I've taught, or for every year group I've been in, or every sort of group of children, or every school that I've been to is slightly different.
Sure.
And And so just to expand on that a little bit, I think
Please
sometimes
do.
when you get areas, just say I've worked in sort of more deprived areas, so I've trained in Birmingham, I've worked in High Wycombe and areas like that, where actually there's a lot more disadvantaged children. You could probably argue that the rates of single parent households are higher.
Yep.
So all of these factors combined now obviously have an impact on the way these children are brought up.
Sure.
And actually what they're experiencing.
Yeah.
Sort of in school, outside of school, and then we start looking into it a little bit more sociologically. I mean, there's various studies to show that actually boys and girls are different biologically.
Of course.
And their innate sort of abilities and their capabilities are also different.
Sure. But this difference, Shabaz, surely should not give rise to weakness, which then gives rise to, or perceived weakness, which then gives rise to exploitation, correct?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I know in the media currently there's this Netflix series, isn't it, Adolescence?
Yes, that's what we were talking about. Yes, correct.
Yeah, you spoke about earlier. Now, I think they do highlight some very, very real issues.
Correct.
They do. I mean, whether, and then I know lots of people have been arguing in the media whether it should be shown, whether it shouldn't be shown. I think that depending on, again, the demographic, depending on the school, depending on the actual issues that have arisen. Now, I'm sure you would have known. I mean, from area to area, each school has different problems. Some have a problem of racial segregation.
Yeah.
Some might have this problem of sort of what we deem as sexism or misogyny or those and attitudes towards men and women.
Sure.
Some might have some sort of other issues, which were, if you're in a more affluent area, might be to do with racism. So I think this documentary or Netflix series, highlights some very real issues.
Sure.
And I think the argument of whether it should be shown or whether it shouldn't be shown has to be left down to the discretion of sort of the professionals in that environment.
Yeah. I think, Shabaz, if there's a couple of points that you mentioned, which I want to come back on. Firstly, I think maybe you're absolutely correct. The discretion of the school, the discretion of the parents, shown, not shown. I think sat here in the studio, it's to make such a ruling. I would be probably the last person to talk about whether it should or should not be shown. So I don't want to get into that, because if it is shown, we are still facing that problem. If it's not shown, we're still facing the problem of misogyny wider than the school, wider than these institutions of brick and mortar that have whiteboards or blackboards, that have teaching aids. That is a wider problem. But one thing I want to maybe just elaborate, maybe explore, Shabaz, on one thing you said, is the social demographic of children, which may give rise to some of these issues. Now, the Netflix series brought this up, okay? There was struggle, and the father was really struggling with work, and although he had his own business, and the mother, and they were in a council estate, and for me, it's disturbing, Shabaz, because it's almost that we are saying the socio-economic upbringing of someone can affect or can lead him to some of these issues. Now, I don't know about you, but I was raised on a council estate. Never have I even thought or dreamt of saying some of the things I see said to girls, or said to women, or said to wives, or said to sisters in society. So I just want to put it in perspective for our listeners. Does socio-demographic really play a big role? And on top of that, I want to give you some evidence. Some of the most educated elite who studied in Eton, and probably the definition suits very well, silver spoon in their mouth at birth, they seem to be the strongest misogynists, and the claims against them, and even some of the issues that the press has related coming from Parliament. How do we square that one?
Okay, I think one of the key things that we have to remember is if any spectrum, I mean, if you envisage it to be a circle, like 360 degrees. Now, if you start on that spectrum of this circle, and you're at one extreme, which could be one side, and you go to the far extreme of the other, they're not too far apart anymore.
Correct.
It's a circular spectrum. Now, so if you're talking of the sort of, just say, the social demographic of the very, very poor, almost underclass, and the super elite. Now, I always think that when you look at it again sociologically, you always want to experience things that they don't have access to.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why you often see, out of desperation, maybe the underclass might do something, and sort of the reasons might be different, but almost the results are the same. It's that extreme, to say the rich and the upper class might do something out of boredom.
Yeah.
So then when we sort of start to break those things down, it's again, I think it comes to what you're exposed to.
Sure.
Like upper class societies, they are exposed to something completely different opposed to the underclass.
Yeah. Very quickly, Shabaz, I just want to read out just had a comment on a WhatsApp from a Khatija who's saying, Salams, Jazakallah for today's much needed discussion. Working in a secondary school, I have first-hand witnessed this misogynistic attitude. Boys making inappropriate comments towards girls, laughing and ridiculing their looks and dress. Boys taking advantage of female teachers. Again, dress code, language, and general disregards to female staff. Like Brother Ali mentioned, its key issues are discussed at home. As parents, we filter through our children's minds and what they may hold. It doesn't suffice to have a one-off discussion. First and foremost, for the parent to be the best role model, husband to show respect towards his wife, brothers show respect and care towards his sisters. These traits, whether they have stemmed from the East or the West, need to be eradicated from our homes, which is the starting point for any nurturing for the child. That's from Khatija Shaban. What's your take on that message, Shabaz?
I mean, first of all, I would agree. I would agree with, regardless of the flaws, they need to be eradicated. I absolutely agree with that. Now, I think if you look at the root cause, I mean, again, if I go back to sort of the sociological approach, and we look at before where we had a functional society, and you can sort of look at Talcott Parsons, Emil Durkheim, Stephen Goldberg, sort of even some psychologists, that actually when we had defined gender roles, we had a traditional society and a functional society. Everybody or everything served a purpose.
Yep. Okay. Just pause there, Shabaz. When you say we had a functional society, did we have a society where this was not openly apparent and it was under the carpet and people just got on with life? Or are we actually said there was a point in time in this part or this part of the globe that women always got respect and women were always treated like princesses and women always had their rights? Because at one point in history, women here were not allowed to vote. It was, I mean, they were not allowed to even own property.
Yep.
So, I mean, what era are we talking about when you say, there was a functional society?
I'm sort of so if we're looking at this, maybe if we look at the post-World War, so where women did get the right to vote, where women were sort of allowed to have better paying jobs, all of these things. And so maybe the 60s and 70s onwards.
Yeah.
And around that period where these sort of studies were conducted, and we had, so when I say a functional society, is we're talking about how traditional gender roles were instrumental for men, expected for women.
Yeah.
And they actually contributed to the stability and function. I mean, we've talked about a lot more of nuclear families where mother and father were present.
Sure, yeah.
And this actually, it helps maintain social order. And now, I think as we've moved through time, we've come to the postmodern relativism. And
correct.
And we've had a breakdown of the narrative, breakdown of roles.
Correct.
And actually,
Correct.
one thing that I think we must ask when we're asking these questions is actually, what is a man? What is a woman? And what are their roles? Because when we're talking,
Yeah.
we're almost looking at things from a perspective of, just say, 50, 100 years ago,
Yep.
and then trying to compare it to the modern society.
Yep. I think the
And that-
problem. I think sorry to butt in there, Shabazz. I think the problem comes in this exact issue, is its definition of man and woman is very subjective. If you move away from the perspective the creator has allotted to the definitions, or the roles and responsibilities, should I say, not the definitions. So a definition of man can be interpreted by a pro-Tate supporter, or it can be interpreted by an anti-Tate supporter. A definition of a woman can be interpreted or defined by a pro-feminist or an anti-feminist. Okay, so where do we actually draw the line on where is the criteria by which we should say, that's objective, that's not leaning, that doesn't have a political leaning? And I think that the crux of the matter lies in explaining to our children something which is very objective and very clear, rather than a political leaning because of a particular era, particular law, particular legislation, particular movement. And I think that's where we maybe the discussion needs to start with our children, that how do you establish objectivity in some of defining these roles and responsibilities?
And I think the first thing that we must start with is respect.
Of
The
course,
very first thing.
of course, definitely.
Because if you, like the children that I teach, I think you have to be respectful to absolutely everybody. And I thought older children and younger children, and when we're talking sort of, you have a basic level of respect, and people can gain your respect, and people can also lose your respect.
Of course,
but the way you treat that person shouldn't then change. You should always be fair in the way you treat people.
Yeah. I definitely agree with you, Shabazz. I definitely agree. The starting point has to be respect. But I'm going to play out a scenario for you. I'm your student, and I would love you to come on next week as well, Shabazz, because our time is so limited. But there's so much to unpack here. But let's just very quickly, for the listeners, play out this. I'm your student. I'm sat in your class, and my teacher, Sir Latif, tells me, speak with each other with respect. And I say, yes, sir, no problem. Then I'm out in the playground. I've got my phone out, YouTube, and there's this real, according to the youth, I don't even know the language anymore, but this real sick rapper, and he's referring to the women as my thing. She's my thing. It's my thing. And it does what I say. And all the expletives and all the very colorful illustration. And then I turn on television and I see something going on where Boris Johnson has made a comment towards Angela Rayner. And then I suddenly look on social media, and Andrew Tate's telling me you can make money and you can drive Ferraris and you can do all of this. And he's also saying, by the way, treat your woman like this. Where does Mr. Latif's narrative fit in when I'm being bombarded with a whole industry?
I think, again, so for me, when I'm speaking to my children, sort of the children, not my personal, but the children that I teach, is often I'll try to bring it down to their level. Because sometimes you have children whose comprehension is far better, some children who don't understand, and their levels of maturity are not the same. So, so in the way in which we break it down to them, so sometimes I know when I teach some of the children from the Asian community or any community, actually, the first thing I'll ask them is, how would you feel if somebody was to speak about your mother or your sister like that? And so, well, I wouldn't be very happy.
Correct. Absolutely.
Why? I always think you can scold somebody. You can take a sledgehammer to a walnut.
Yeah.
And you can sort of fashion, but actually, is that objective in what you want to achieve? Probably not. And there's a time and place for it, because you might explain to somebody and say, look, to a child, look, this is not appropriate. How would you feel if it was your mom or your sister, or as the children get older, you might say your partner, or whatever it is.
Sure.
But if they continue not to listen, you might take a bit more of a firm approach.
Okay.
I think initially what we have to then go in with is actually going with this approach of actually, let's have a chat. Listen, why are you talking like this? Okay, what can I do to change that? How can I change your opinion? Now, there was a talk that I listened to very quickly, and I'll summarize it. And it was
we've got 30 seconds, Shabaz.
And the guy basically said, there's two people having a debate, and one's being scolded, even though he's correct, and he's scolded incorrectly, people are going to attract sympathy.
Yeah.
Because of the way you spoke to him. If you speak to him in a different way, he might not attract that sympathy, and actually might attract the understanding of the wider.
Shabaz, we're on 5 seconds. Can we please resume, if possible, next week? Thank you to the listeners for joining me on the Parenting Show.
No, thank you for having me.